delightful idea that we pose good general questions to all people in the room to reflect upon for further discussion. The first is essentially, what are the different types of inequalities? For the first few presentations, it was quite apparent that we were discussing various types, right? Income inequality versus wealth inequality, being driven perhaps by more low-paid jobs or more high-paid jobs. So what's the relationship between these and what should we really worry about, if anything? This is good. The second one, I hope you can see this, both of you. What are the most important policies for growth in Europe? And is there a relationship there, positive or negative, with inequality? Do we need to have increasing inequality in order to have growth? Or can we solve the inequality problem or address it in some way with increased growth? So I'm sure that all of you have some ideas of thought about this. Please consider this, and we can have a joint brainstorming session after the presentation. I would like to introduce my former advisor and current professor at Lund University, Frederic Delmar. You have been in the entrepreneurship field for quite a number of years, 91, 2 decades. The issue of inequality has been on your mind for at least a year, but perhaps even longer. And I know this is going to be about occupation, but it will bring an additional spin to the idea of where does inequality reside in and how does it differ across various occupations. So that will be very interesting. Frederic, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So we have the first 30 minutes.
Yes.
Starting now, and I have now 29 minutes and 50 seconds left. Thank you for having all of you here. It's late Saturday afternoon, it's sweaty, and I hope it's going to be interesting and challenging enough to keep you awake. Or at least not long too much after the Saturday beer out sitting outside in the green Swedish summer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about economic growth, inequality, and entrepreneurship. I'm going to do that in 2 stages. I'm going to talk a little bit about basically what all of you have been talking about, so I'm going to be very fast about that. And then I'm going to talk specifically about a research project that I have with one of my doctoral students, Frederic Delmar, who is going to be my 11th doctoral student to graduate now in September. So I'm finally have a football team of former doctoral students. So that's going to be good. We can challenge Paris Saint-Germain, perhaps, at least in terms of publications. But anyway, so, and that's what we're doing in that, we're looking at occupations with a simple following statement. Some occupations are 150 times more likely to generate self-employment than other occupations. 150. This is kind of well known so you have a lot of statistics on that at the EU level and in the US and obviously in Sweden. But what is strange is that nobody, except some economists in the 70s, has asked the question, why is it that some occupations are 150 times more likely to generate self-employment entry than others? People are taking that as a fact, but nobody has been looking at what is. So that's what we're doing in that specific research project, and we're saying that why is that important is, well, most research in entrepreneurship or in self-employment entries, and I'm not going to talk about entrepreneurship yet, I'm just going to talk about self-employment entry when I talk about this specific research project, assumes that there is a unique labor market. In a lesser of cases, they're going to include dummies for occupations, but the fundamental assumption is that this is a single labor market which, based on Febb's small angle metaphor from the 1970s, says this is probably not true, and therefore observations are dependent, and some, and therefore we cannot think about, we need to think about a number of small islands or a number of labor markets that all of them function independently of each other, and this is picked up, and here comes the inequality part of it, by the wage structure. So that's going to be the empirical explanation of why I'm interested in economic growth, inequality, and entrepreneurship. And then I'm going to come back to this overall framework and give you a couple of suggestions of what is missing today in entrepreneurship research in general, and what are the consequences of what we have found in terms of policies and the kind of recommendations that you can make. And hopefully I will be able to do that in the 25 minutes that is left. So what is economic growth? Yada yada, we know that, including productive growth, entrepreneurship. So basically why I'm interested in that is the following thing that I observed traveling around in China, traveling around in a lot of is sustainable development means social development. So economic growth for me is about both ecological sustainable development and social development. What we see and what we link that is that really poor people have to work. When they get a little bit richer, they buy a normal bike and they bike to work. And then when they get even richer, they drive a car. And then that's the carbon footprint for you. But when you're really rich, like in Sweden or in California or stuff like that, what happens? You stroll. You take the bike again. That's luxury consumption, is not to take the car, because you want to be able to buy and live in a place when you don't have to commute a long way. So that's kind of interesting in why economic growth is important. Now, so my argument, basic argument, is that this can be combined and that we need to think about those issues as well. The other thing, and that's also why entrepreneurship and the current discussion on entrepreneurship relative to productive growth is giving basically a very one-side picture of, and to sort of Pontus is not here because he would really like to argue with me about this. It's a very one-side picture of what is happening based on, basically because entrepreneurship theory that we're using today is old and has not integrated a lot of those changes that are quite dramatic that has been portrayed during the afternoon. Skill-based technological change, service sector growth, transaction cost economies, that is the average size of firms are going down because of market solutions, and also that the firms in themselves organize differently in terms of teams rather than hierarchies. And all of that has not been put into modern theories of how entrepreneurship works and has not yet been linked to types of economic growth. And then because you have this antigeneity problem, what is the cause of what it is the effect, and what is it productive or inclusive, and or that we're thinking about. So this is kind of the general opening up the debate on this subject. And why do we care and why don't we know each other? Well, a lot of what we see and what has been discussed already is that the way we measure by self-employment. Self-employment is not leading to growth. That was Erica was saying that, and we know that. Now, the other thing is the social mobility promise of entrepreneurship. This is the fundamental reason that we're standing here is because we want to give people the opportunity for self-improvement through entrepreneurship. Otherwise, we wouldn't care about entrepreneurship. So the core question, is there social mobility through entrepreneurship? And the answer to that question seems to be today, based on US data, and Norwegian data, and Danish data, no. Okay? I could go home now. I've done my work. Let's not talk anymore about entrepreneurship in terms of self-employment. But what you find is entrepreneurship is luxury consumption. Those that are already well off, that can take the risk, and have the luxury to develop and start a business, to do whatever they want to do. And that's not the way we like to think about it. We like to think about people trying to create better for everyone. But what we're seeing is that, so to sum up few direct effects, we're seeing some indirect effects. For example, work that I've done with car, we see that while most entrepreneurs don't grow or anything like that, they have a positive effect on industry growth, especially in the technology area. So what we're seeing is kind of a meek picture of entrepreneurship and economic growth. Okay. So theory is not working, empiricism is not working. Are there possible ways of looking at this differently that could give us different answers and perhaps help us to create better policies and better tools to support, for example, entrepreneurship students? So I'm going to talk about this occupation, so 150 times more. The assumption of one labor market as a challenge, the notion of small islands with frictions between them. So it is costly to move from one occupation to another, going from a doctor to an engineer, but also going from an employed doctor to being self-employed. So this means in terms of statistical terms that observation are dependent, not independent of each other, which is a fundamental assumption that we do. And we're looking at occupational wage structures, and we're doing that because this is, as Frederic is an economist, I'm not an economist, I'm a management scholar. I do read economics from time to time. But what it is, it's mean wage, wage variance, and unemployment. And mean wage and wage variance is what we mostly say, but also talk a bit about unemployment because we also see this as a risk. Now, two things about that. This is what is dominating in the occupational literature when you're talking about wage inequality and how it is measured. But it's also what a lot of entrepreneurship theories are talking about in terms of marginal utility and opportunity cost to enter self-employment. So it kind of mirrors the occupation literature and the self-employment on entry here. So what we're saying, and the question we're asking is, well, this seems to, that occupational linked to the probability of entry, that is, that you actually leave your employment to start your own business. And second, what type of entry you're going to do. And this is the question that you have about separating out incorporated versus unincorporated firms. Now, why is that important? Well, there is very simply, and I think it's obvious to everyone, it's that incorporated firms provide a growth option that unincorporated firms do not provide. But also there is a cost prohibition to start an incorporated firm that does not exist for unincorporated firms. So you would assume that